Welcome, everyone. Today we will take you through the small but great country of Singapore. Singapore has an intriguing history as it started as a tiny peninsula and has boomed into a trading powerhouse. We chose this country as it not only has significant influence on trading, but also because it is a country that uses innovation, creation, and its location to compensate for its disadvantageous size. Where is Singapore located? It's right here. To get a better idea about Singapore as a country, let's look back into their history. Singapore was founded in 1819 by Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles, where he established Singapore as a trading station. Soon, the island's policy of free trade attracted merchants from all over Asia and from as far away as the Middle East and the US. Singapore fell under the Japanese invasion during World War II in 1942. However, 3 years later, it fell back under British colonial rule. Shortly thereafter, a rise in nationalism led it to its breakaway from colonial rule into the Federation of Malaysia. However, due to Singapore's pro-multicultural policies, Malaysia expelled Singapore from the Federation in 1965. Singapore then became a very small, independent territory without an abundant resource and a very poor standard of living. But how does Singapore succeed without an abundant natural resource? To compensate, Singapore has provided subsidies for education, which have increased the amount of skilled laborers and ultimately has created a strong economy rich in human capital rather than simply natural resources. Resulting from this abundance of human capital, Singapore's major economic sectors are that of electronics manufacturing, financial services, more specifically wealth management, and chemical development and manufacturing. Of the $16 billion in fixed asset investments in 2012, electronics accounted for almost 38.8% of their total investments. Employment for the industry stands at 80,000, which is 19% of total manufacturing jobs. Singapore's GDP has boomed from roughly 30 billion in 1990 all the way to 275 billion in 2012. Furthermore, in 2012, Singapore's GDP per capita was 34,000, which marks over a 100% increase from being 16,000 in 1965. From 2000 to 2012, Singapore's unemployment rate has fluctuated between 1.8 and 2%. That is so low. Now let's focus a little bit on their trade and FDI. Singapore is known for being a trading powerhouse with its prime location, making it one of the busiest ports in the world, which establishes its reputation as the Switzerland of Asia. The centrality of its location allows for the country to act as a primary passageway for its neighboring countries' exports as well as import. So what products does Singapore export? Singapore's largest exporting industry is the machinery and electrical industry. Within this industry, 20% of their exports are electronic integrated circuits valued at $49 billion. Singapore also exports printers and copying machines, mechanical appliance, and other office machines and electronic devices. The second largest industry is the mineral products, which is its primary export being petroleum oils, which is valued at $47 billion. Singapore also plays a major role in the chemical and allied industries, as well as metals, stones and glass, plastics and rubbers, foodstuffs, animal products, textiles, woods and wood products, and footwear industries. What countries does Singapore export to? They export primarily to Hong Kong, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, the US, and Australia, just to name a few. Now that we've talked about exports, what about their imports? What products do they import? They participate in intra-industry trade, and which means that they import nearly the same amount of the products that they export. 17% of their imports are electronic integrated circuits, which I mentioned earlier. 17% are refined petroleum oils. 7.3% are crude oils, and 2.4% are cruise ships and other vessels for human transportation, including parts for aircraft. The countries in which they import from also match the countries that receive their exports. These again include China, Malaysia, the US, Japan, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Korea, just to name a few more. Singapore has signed free trade agreements with countries from all over the world and is also a member of the WTO, the World Trade Organization, as well as the Association of Southern Asian Nations. To have a better understanding of Singapore's trading power, what economic theories are applicable? The HO model states that countries should establish their focus on industries that use their abundant factor intensely. But the problem is, Singapore doesn't have a natural abundant factor. Due to their dedication to higher education, Singapore has created their own abundant factor in the form of skilled workers. This factor is especially useful as it leads to a higher level of efficiency and productivity. It is clear that Singapore's primary trading occurs in the electronic industry. They utilize what the new trade theory explains as intra-industry trade, by which they both import and export from the same industry. However, Singapore uses this model to their advantage by importing low-quality electronic parts, and then by using their high-skilled labor that I previously mentioned, they transform it into a high-end product which establishes differentiation of their quality product from many other electronics. Now that we've spoken about the trade, what about their FDI? FDI is extremely important to this country's economy as it accounts for over 20% of its GDP. The country ranked number 8 of the top 20 host countries of FDI. Their primary business partners in this regard are the US, the UK, the Netherlands, Hong Kong, and Japan. Singapore takes many anti-corruption measures, and their policies make engaging in FDI with them very attractive for source countries. Domestic business and multinational corporations, also known as MNCs, are treated equally under the law, and their inflation rate is well controlled at approximately 1.8%. The World Bank has named it easiest place to do business 7 years in a row. The financial and insurance services sector attracted the most FDI, followed by manufacturing and wholesale and retail trade sectors. Together, these three sectors account for more than 4/5 of FDI in all of Singapore. Who are the top sources of FDI in Singapore? Europe and Asia claim the top 2 spots. And as of 2011, 37.5% of total FDI came from European investors, while about 24.1% was contributed by Asian investors. From Europe, the Netherlands and the UK were the top contributors of FDI, while in Asia, Japan was the top source of FDI, accounting for roughly 30% of all FDI coming from that region. Due to Singapore's heavy dependence on foreign direct investment in international business, Singapore is extremely globalized, which leads Singapore to be vulnerable to the health of the world and the economic health of its partners. Singapore's currency is different than ours, so what do we know about their exchange rate? Singapore uses a managed floating exchange rate. This trade-weighted exchange rate is allowed to fluctuate within a policy band. This allows Singapore to accommodate for short-term fluctuations in foreign exchange markets and flexibility in managing its own exchange rate, which we know is highly important to this nation as it is very dependent on its surrounding nations. This rate gives Singapore the flexibility to deal with surrounding shocks, but still maintaining its own purchasing power. This managed float keeps inflation and interest levels low, and the expectation for the Singapore dollar is for it to only continue to rise. When the conditions in the economy change and it is necessary to reduce the exchange rate, the government does so by direct measure, and they do this by reducing wages instead of raising inflation. In conclusion, through our research, we are very impressed with how this tiny island has become a key factor in world trade. Given the disadvantages Singapore has faced, it has taken advantage of its geographical location and has invested in its own people who have become its best asset. Today, Singapore is a major contributor to economic growth and worldwide living standards. Its diverse population and job opportunities attract many migrants. We don't see Singapore's success leaving anytime soon, so we hope that you have enjoyed learning about this country.